Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the world had almost ended and no one warned you. During the Cold War, humanity was just a few decisions away from total annihilation. A radar glitch, a faulty chip, a misunderstood rocket launch, each could have triggered a nuclear war. Yet somehow, through luck, hesitation, or pure human instinct, disaster was averted. These weren't fictional accidents or secret movie plots. They were real moments recorded in classified documents and military transcripts when civilization balanced on a razor's edge. Today, we'll revisit the 6 closest instances of a nuclear attack in history, the moments when a single wrong move could have changed everything. But first, I ask that you like the video, subscribe if you enjoy this type of content, and leave a comment with any upcoming topics. Number 1. The B-29 Submarine Incident, 1962. The day was October 27, 1962, and the world stood on the edge of the abyss. The Cuban Missile Crisis between the United States and the Soviet Union could have escalated at any moment, potentially triggering a nuclear war. Washington demanded that Moscow remove its nuclear missiles from the island of Cuba, less than 200 kilometers from the U.S. coast. Amid the crisis, military vessels from both countries were engaged in a strategic struggle to maintain control over their areas of influence, anticipating a possible global conflict. The Soviet submarine fleet was assigned to patrol the waters around Cuba for reconnaissance and control. Some of these submarines were armed with torpedoes carrying nuclear warheads. Inside one of these submarines, the B-29, an event occurred that could have triggered an atomic conflict. The submarine lost contact with the rest of the fleet, and the crew believed that war had already begun. Soviet Navy protocol dictated that in the event of an enemy attack, launching a nuclear torpedo required the unanimous approval of 3 senior officers on the vessel. 2 officers supported launching the torpedo, but a 3rd refused. His name was Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov. Arkhipov insisted that no attack should be launched without direct confirmation from Moscow. After a heated argument, he convinced the captain to surface instead. If that torpedo had been fired, the U.S. would likely have responded with a full-scale nuclear strike against Cuba and the Soviet Union. Historians believe a global nuclear war could have erupted within hours. One man's restraint may have saved hundreds of millions of lives and the world as we know it. Number 2. The Goldsboro Incident, 1961. January 24, 1961. A cold night over Goldsboro, North Carolina, became one of the closest calls to nuclear disaster in history. A U.S. B-52 bomber was on a routine patrol carrying 2 Mark 39 hydrogen bombs, each with a yield nearly 250 times that of Hiroshima. During mid-air fueling, the bomber experienced a catastrophic fuel leak, losing 17 tons of fuel in just 3 minutes. The crew attempted to maintain control, but the aircraft became unstable. At 9,000 feet, the pilot ordered the crew to eject. 5 men survived, but tragically, 3 died during the accident. As the plane broke apart, the nuclear bombs fell to the ground. One of the bombs went through 3 of its 4 arming stages, leaving only a single safety switch between it and detonation. The other bomb partially armed itself, but was stopped by its parachute, which slowed its fall and prevented disaster. If that single safety switch had failed, a nuclear explosion could have wiped out a large portion of the U.S. East Coast, including Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and New York. The radioactive fallout alone could have killed millions of people. A tiny mechanical safeguard, a single switch, prevented the United States from experiencing its first nuclear catastrophe.
Number 3. The Soviet False Alarm, 1983. September 26, 1983. The Cold War was at its most tense, and the world lived under the constant shadow of nuclear threat. Late at night, Soviet early warning systems suddenly detected 5 incoming U.S. missiles headed straight for the USSR. Alarms blared, warning lights flashed, and military commanders braced for the worst. Protocol demanded an immediate retaliatory strike, one that could have triggered full-scale nuclear war within minutes. On duty that night was Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, a Soviet air defense officer. He analyzed the alert and noticed something unusual. Why would the United States launch only 5 missiles instead of hundreds in a real attack? Trusting his judgment, Petrov decided not to report the alarm as an actual attack, suspecting a false positive from the satellite system. Minutes later, confirmation arrived. There were no missiles. The warning was caused by sunlight reflecting off clouds misread by Soviet satellites. If Petrov had followed protocol, the Soviet Union would have launched hundreds of warheads at the United States and its allies. The U.S. would have responded immediately, and a global nuclear war could have been unleashed in mere hours. One man's calm assessment of data and his willingness to trust reason over protocol likely prevented the destruction of the world.
Number 4. The Titan II Missile Explosion, 1980. September 18, 1980. In Damascus, Arkansas, a routine maintenance task nearly turned into one of the most catastrophic nuclear accidents in U.S. history. A Titan II intercontinental ballistic missile, armed with a 9-megaton warhead, 600 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, was being serviced inside its underground silo. During the operation, a technician dropped a socket wrench, which pierced the missile's fuel tank. This caused a highly volatile fuel leak, filling the silo with flammable vapors. Hours later, the missile exploded in a violent blast. The warhead was thrown hundreds of meters away, but miraculously, it did not detonate. Despite the immense destruction, only one person was killed, but the potential consequences were far more terrifying. If the warhead had detonated, the explosion would have obliterated the surrounding town and spread deadly radioactive fallout across multiple states. A simple mistake, a dropped tool, could have triggered one of the largest nuclear disasters in history. This incident reminds us how human error and mechanical vulnerability can bring the world dangerously close to annihilation.
Number 5. The NORAD computer chip incident, 1979. November 9, 1979. Inside the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, a routine day suddenly turned into a moment of extreme peril. Operators were startled by alarms and flashing screens reporting hundreds of incoming Soviet nuclear missiles heading toward the United States. Bomber crews were placed on high alert, missile silos were prepared for launch, and military personnel awaited the order to retaliate. For several tense minutes, it seemed that global nuclear war was imminent. The cause of the panic? A faulty computer chip. A training simulation had accidentally been loaded into the live system, making it appear as though a real attack was underway. No missiles were coming. It was a false alarm triggered by a minor technical error. If confirmation had taken just a few minutes longer, U.S. forces could have launched an actual nuclear response to a phantom attack. A global nuclear war could have started entirely by accident, demonstrating how human oversight and technical glitches can create the illusion of annihilation.
Number 6. The Norwegian Rocket Incident, 1995. January 25, 1995. The Cold War was officially over, but the nuclear danger hadn't disappeared. That morning, Russian early warning radar stations detected what appeared to be a ballistic missile launched from the coast of Norway, heading directly toward Russian airspace. The system concluded it could be an American Trident missile, possibly carrying a nuclear warhead. Within minutes, the alert reached President Boris Yeltsin himself, marking the first and only time in history a world leader activated his nuclear briefcase, known as the Cheget. Russian strategic forces went on full standby, awaiting the command to retaliate. They had only a few minutes to decide whether to launch a counterstrike against the United States. The object continued on its trajectory, and tension in the command room was unbearable. Then, relief. Radar tracking confirmed that the missile was actually a scientific rocket launched by a Norwegian research team to study the Northern Lights. Norway had notified 30 countries, including Russia, about the launch weeks before, but the message never reached the right military channels. If Yeltsin had given the order, hundreds of nuclear warheads could have been launched toward the US and NATO countries, reigniting a global nuclear conflict, 4 years after the end of the Cold War. A simple communication failure had brought the world within minutes of disaster. This incident remains one of the most chilling examples of how miscommunication and mistrust can nearly end civilization even in times of peace.
That was today's video. If you liked the video, leave a like, consider subscribing, and use the comments to suggest a next topic. See you next time.